What happens when someone's assumptions about you become so loud that they drown out the truth of who you really are? What occurs when the color of your skin blinds others to the content of your bank account, the depth of your success, or the breadth of your dreams? It's a warm summer evening in 2019 at the prestigious Harbor Bay Marina in Newport Beach, California. A black man in his 50s steps out of a modest Honda Civic and walks toward the dock, carrying what appears to be overnight bags. Within minutes, 3 police officers surround him, their hands resting on their weapons, their voices sharp with suspicion. "Sir, this is a private marina," one officer says, his tone leaving no room for misunderstanding. "You need to have authorization to be here." When the man calmly explains that he's checking on his boat, the officers exchange glances that speak volumes. One of them actually laughs a sound that cuts through the marina's evening calm like a blade through silk. "Your boat?" The officer's voice drips with disbelief. "Listen, friend, you people don't own yachts. Now why don't you tell us what you're really doing here before we have to arrest you for trespassing?" The man they were speaking to was Dr. Marcus Thompson, a cardiovascular surgeon who had built a multi-million-dollar medical practice, owned 3 homes, and yes, owned not 1, but 2 luxury yachts worth more than most people's houses. But in that moment, all the officers could see was a black man who didn't belong in their exclusive white world. This isn't just a story about mistaken identity or a case of wrong place, wrong time. It's a story about the dangerous assumptions we make about success, about wealth, about who gets to dream big in America. It's about what happens when someone decides to turn humiliation into action, prejudice into purpose, and a moment of racism into a lifetime of change. Dr. Marcus Thompson's journey to success began in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles, where he was born in 1965, just months before the Watts riots would tear through his community. His mother, Dorothy Thompson, worked double shifts as a hospital janitor to support Marcus and his 2 sisters after their father abandoned the family when Marcus was 7 years old. Their apartment was small, their resources limited, but Dorothy's belief in education was unlimited. "Baby, your mind is your ticket out of here," Dorothy would tell Marcus as she helped him with homework at their kitchen table, her hands still smelling of industrial disinfectant from her cleaning job. "Nobody can take your education away from you, no matter what color you are." The 1970s and 1980s in Watts were defined by poverty, gang violence, and the lingering effects of decades of systemic racism. The neighborhood that had once been a thriving African-American community had been devastated by discriminatory housing policies, disinvestment, and the crack epidemic. For young black men like Marcus, the statistics were grim: more likely to end up in prison than college, more likely to die young and to build wealth. But Marcus was different. While his friends were drawn to the streets, he was drawn to books. While others saw limitations, he saw possibilities. His high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, recognized his potential and spent countless hours helping him navigate college applications and scholarship opportunities that most kids in Watts never even knew existed. Marcus earned a full scholarship to UCLA, where he was one of only 12 black students in his pre-med program. The transition from Watts to Westwood was jarring. Suddenly, he was surrounded by classmates who had grown up with private tutors, family vacations to Europe, and parents who were doctors, lawyers, and executives. Many of his professors and classmates made it clear, through subtle comments and not-so-subtle assumptions, that they questioned whether he belonged there. "Are you sure you can handle the rigor of medical school?" one professor asked him during office hours. "Maybe you should consider a less demanding major." But Marcus had learned early that other people's limitations were not his own. He graduated magna cum laude and earned admission to Harvard Medical School, where he specialized in cardiovascular surgery. The discrimination didn't stop. If anything, it intensified. In medical school and later in his residency, he was consistently mistaken for orderlies, custodial staff, or cafeteria workers. Patients would refuse his care, demanding to see a real doctor. Colleagues would question his surgical decisions more harshly than they questioned white doctors with similar experience. The boating connection came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Morrison, a white cardiovascular surgeon who became Marcus's mentor during his fellowship at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Dr. Morrison owned a sailboat and invited Marcus to join him for weekend sailing trips. At first, Marcus was hesitant. Boating seemed like something for rich white people, not kids from Watts, but there was something magical about being on the water. The ocean didn't care about your zip code or the color of your skin. The wind didn't discriminate. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt a sense of freedom that had nothing to do with overcoming obstacles or proving himself to skeptics. "You." "No, Marcus," Dr. Morrison said during one of their sailing trips. "The water is one of the few places in America where your skill matters more than your skin color. Out here, if you can navigate and handle the boat, that's all that counts." By 1995, Marcus had established his own cardiovascular surgery practice in Newport Beach. He was making more money than he had ever dreamed possible growing up in Watts. But he never forgot where he came from. He established a scholarship fund for kids from underserved communities who wanted to pursue careers in medicine, and he regularly returned to Watts to speak at local schools. The success also allowed him to pursue his passion for boating. In 2010, he purchased his first yacht, a 45-foot azimuth named Dorothy's Dream, after his mother. 5 years later, he added a second yacht, a 60-foot Sunseeker called Against All Odds. But wealth couldn't shield him from racism. If anything, his success seemed to make some people more suspicious, more resentful. The assumption that black people couldn't legitimately afford luxury items was so deeply ingrained in American culture that his presence in exclusive spaces was always questioned, always scrutinized, always doubted. The evening of July 15, 2019, was supposed to be the beginning of a relaxing weekend. Dr. Marcus Thompson had just finished a grueling 14-hour surgery to repair a complex aortic aneurysm, and he was looking forward to spending 2 days on his yacht with his wife, Angela, and their teenage daughter, Zoe. The plan was simple: drive to Harbor Bay Marina, board the Dorothy's Dream, and sail down the coast to Catalina Island for some much-needed family time. Marcus arrived at the marina around 8 p.m., earlier than Angela and Zoe, who were finishing packing at home. Harbor Bay Marina was one of the most exclusive marinas on the West Coast, home to yachts worth millions of dollars, and frequented by celebrities, tech moguls, and old money families. Marcus had been keeping his boat there for 5 years and was well known to the marina staff, but apparently not to everyone. As he walked down the dock toward Slip 47 where his yacht was moored, Marcus noticed a security guard he didn't recognize, talking into a radio. Within minutes, the guard was approaching him, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. "Excuse me, sir," said Officer David Patterson, a heavy-set white man in his 40s, whose tone immediately put Marcus on edge. "We've received reports of someone acting suspiciously around the boats. Can I see some identification?" Marcus was used to this routine. In his 25 years of professional success, he had been stopped, questioned, and asked to prove his right to be in countless spaces that he had every legal right to occupy. He reached for his wallet, but Officer Patterson's hand moved to his weapon. "Slowly," Patterson commanded, his voice rising. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The second officer, a younger man named Rodriguez, circled behind Marcus, while Patterson continued his interrogation. "What are you doing here tonight?" "I'm going to my boat," Marcus replied calmly, handing over his driver's license. "I keep my yacht in Slip 47. Patterson examined the license with exaggerated suspicion. as if checking for signs of forgery. Dr. Marcus Thompson, he read aloud, his voice dripping with skepticism. And you say you own a boat here? That's correct. I've had a slip here for 5 years. The third officer, a woman named Collins, had been silent until this point. Now she stepped forward, her expression a mixture of disbelief and amusement. Sir, are you sure you're in the right place? This is Harbor Bay Marina. The boats here are worth more than most people make in a lifetime. Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he had experienced countless times when his competence, his success, or his very presence was questioned because of his race. But he remained calm, professional. Officers, if you'll just let me show you to my boat, we can clear this up quickly. Patterson laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed across the water. Your boat? Listen, friend, let's be real here. You? People don't own yachts. You might work on them, you might clean them, but you don't own them. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time. What are you really doing here? The phrase "you people" hit Marcus like a physical blow. In 2 words, Officer Patterson had reduced him from a successful cardiovascular surgeon to a racial stereotype. All of Marcus's achievements, his Harvard Medical School degree, his pioneering surgical techniques, his multi-million-dollar practice, were invisible to these officers. All they could see was a black man who didn't belong in their world. Officers, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. I am Dr. Marcus Thompson. I am a cardiovascular surgeon with a practice in Newport Beach. I have owned boats at this marina for 5 years. My yacht is in slip 47, about 200 yards from where we're standing. If you'll allow me to show you— No, Patterson interrupted. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around, walk back to whatever piece of junk car you drove here, and leave. If I see you on this dock again tonight, you're going to jail for trespassing. The situation escalated quickly when Marcus pulled out his phone to call his wife. Officer Rodriguez immediately drew his weapon. Drop the phone, Rodriguez shouted. Get your hands up. I'm calling my wife, Marcus said, his hands raised. She's on her way here with our daughter. I want her to know what's happening. Collins grabbed the phone from Marcus's hand and threw it onto the dock, where the screen shattered. You don't make calls until we say you can make calls. By now, other marina patrons had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion. Some were recording with their phones, others were whispering among themselves. Marcus recognized several faces, wealthy boat owners he had chatted with over the years, people who knew exactly who he was and what he owned. But none of them spoke up. None of them vouched for him. In that moment, Marcus understood something profound about how wealth and privilege work in America. They protect you only as long as you don't threaten the assumptions that underpin them. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, if not for the arrival of Marina Manager Robert Chun, who had been alerted by security cameras and radio chatter. Chun rushed down the dock, his face flushed with embarrassment and concern. Officers, stop. Chun called. Out. This is Dr. Thompson. He's one of our premium slip holders. He owns the Azimuth in slip 47 and the Sunseeker in slip 23. Patterson looked confused, as if Chun had just spoken in a foreign language. Are you sure? He asked. Look at him. Chun's face reddened further. Officers, Dr. Thompson has been a valued client of this marina for 5 years. He owns 2 of the most expensive boats we have here. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. The officers looked at each other, suddenly uncertain. Rodriguez holstered his weapon, but Patterson wasn't ready to admit his mistake. Well, why didn't he just say so from the beginning? Patterson muttered. If he had cooperated instead of acting suspicious. Marcus finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of decades of similar encounters. Officer Patterson, I told you exactly who I was and what I was doing here from the first moment you approached me. The only thing suspicious about my behavior was the color of my skin in a place where you didn't expect to see it." As the officers retreated, Shen apologized profusely, but the damage was done. Marcus's peaceful evening had been shattered, his dignity assaulted, and his family's safety threatened, all because 3 police officers couldn't imagine that a black man might legitimately belong in an exclusive marina. But as Marcus watched the officers drive away, he felt something unexpected, not just anger, but determination. He was going to make sure this never happened again, not to him, not to any other successful black person who dared to enjoy the fruits of their labor in spaces that America still considered whites only. The night of the marina incident, Dr. Marcus Thompson couldn't sleep. He sat in his home office, still wearing the clothes he had planned to change out of on his yacht, staring at his shattered phone and replaying every moment of the encounter. His wife Angela found him there at 3 a.m., surrounded by legal documents and his laptop computer. "Marcus," she said softly, "you need to let this go. We both know this wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last." But Marcus couldn't let it go. For 25 years, he had absorbed the slights, the assumptions, the everyday racism that came with being a successful black man in predominantly white spaces. He had told himself that his achievements spoke for themselves, that his work would eventually earn him the respect and recognition he deserved. But the marina incident had shattered that illusion. "Angela," he said, turning to face his wife, "I've spent my entire career saving people's lives. I've performed over 3,000 heart surgeries. I've trained dozens of other surgeons. I've donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to charity. And 3 police officers looked at me and saw nothing but a criminal who didn't belong." The psychological impact of the incident was immediate and devastating. Marcus found himself unable to concentrate during surgeries, his hands shaking slightly as he made incisions that required perfect precision. His colleagues noticed his distraction, and for the first time in his career, Marcus began to doubt his own abilities. Dr. Sarah Kim, his surgical partner, confronted him after he uncharacteristically snapped at a nurse during a routine procedure. "Marcus, what's going on? You've been different ever since that weekend. This isn't like you." Marcus told her about the marina incident, watching her face change from confusion to horror to anger. Dr. Kim, a Korean-American woman who had faced her own share of discrimination in medicine, understood the corrosive effect of racism on even the most successful people. "You need to fight this," she told him. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you." But the legal system offered little recourse. Marcus hired David Rodriguez, one of the top civil rights attorneys in California, who explained the harsh reality of police misconduct cases. "The officers will say they were responding to a suspicious person call," Rodriguez explained during their first meeting. "They'll claim they were just doing their job and that race had nothing to do with it. Without clear evidence of racial animus, which is almost impossible to prove, it's very difficult to win these cases." The department's internal investigation was predictably superficial. Officer Patterson received a written reprimand for procedural errors in handling the incident. Officers Rodriguez and Collins received mandatory sensitivity training. No one was suspended, disciplined, or held accountable for the racial profiling that was obvious to anyone who watched the marina's security footage. The lack of accountability ate at Marcus's sense of justice. He began researching similar incidents and discovered that his experience was part of a much larger pattern. According to research he found, Black Americans were routinely questioned, detained, or arrested for suspicious behavior that consisted of nothing more than existing in spaces where their presence was unexpected. Marcus learned about the concept of shopping while black, the persistent harassment of black customers in upscale stores. He read about driving while black, the disproportionate traffic stops of black drivers, especially those driving luxury vehicles. And now he had experienced boating while black, the assumption that successful black people couldn't legitimately afford the markers of wealth and leisure that white Americans took for granted. The research led him to other black boat owners who had faced similar discrimination. Through online forums and word of mouth, he connected with dozens of people who had been questioned, harassed, or excluded from marinas, yacht clubs, and boating communities across the country. There was Dr. Patricia Williams, a psychiatrist from Atlanta who had been denied membership at an exclusive yacht club despite meeting all the financial and experience requirements. There was Robert Jackson, a tech entrepreneur from Seattle who had been arrested for stealing his own boat when he tried to take it out of a marina where he had paid for storage. There was Jennifer Davis, a successful attorney from Miami who had been told by a marina manager that your kind weren't welcome at their facility. Each story reinforced Marcus's growing understanding that racism in America wasn't just about individual prejudice. It was about systemic exclusion from the spaces, institutions, and opportunities that defined American success. No matter how much money black Americans earned, no matter how many degrees they accumulated, no matter how respectable their professions, they would always be seen as intruders in spaces that white America considered its own. The turning point came when Marcus attended a meeting of the Black Boaters Association, a national organization he had never heard of before the marina incident. The meeting was held at a community center in Long Beach, and Marcus was amazed to see more than 200 black boat owners, marina operators, and maritime professionals sharing their experiences and strategizing responses to discrimination. "We've been scattered for too long," said the organization's president, Captain Janet Morrison. "We've been dealing with these problems individually, thinking we were alone. But when we come together, when we share our resources and our knowledge, we become powerful." It was at that meeting that Marcus learned about Jason McGuire, one of only 11 black marina operators in the world, who had built a successful business despite facing constant discrimination from suppliers, customers, and competitors. He met Will Lee, who had started a luxury yacht charter business in Mexico after being repeatedly denied opportunities in the United States. He connected with dozens of other successful black people who had refused to let racism limit their dreams. For the first time since the marina incident, Marcus felt hopeful. He realized that his response to discrimination didn't have to be passive acceptance or futile legal challenges. He could take action that would create lasting change, not just for himself, but for an entire community of people who had been excluded for too long. 3 months after the marina incident, Dr. Marcus Thompson was ready to make his statement. But it wouldn't be made in a courtroom or a legal brief. It would be made on the water, in the language that the marina community would understand most clearly. Wealth, success, and undeniable presence. Marcus had spent the months since the incident quietly but methodically planning his response. He had liquidated some investments, refinanced properties, and called in favors from colleagues and business partners. His goal was simple but powerful: to demonstrate that not only could black people afford yachts, but they could afford to own multiple yachts that would dwarf anything currently docked at Harbor Bay Marina. The day he chose for his demonstration was Harbor Bay's annual Summer Yacht Festival, the most prestigious boating event on the West Coast. Hundreds of wealthy boat owners would gather to show off their vessels, network with other affluent members of the marina community, and enjoy an exclusive party that was invitation-only. Marcus had received an invitation every year for the past 5 years. This year, he planned to accept it in style. At precisely 10 a.m. on the morning of the festival, Marcus's plan went into motion. The first yacht to appear on the horizon was a stunning 85-foot Azimut Grande named Dorothy's Legacy. Vessel Marcus had purchased the week before for $3.2 million. The yacht was gleaming white with gold accents, equipped with every luxury imaginable, and staffed by a professional crew of 6. But Marcus wasn't finished. 30 minutes later, a second yacht appeared, a magnificent 95-foot Sunseeker Predator, called Against All Odds 2, which had cost Marcus $4.8 million and featured amenities that most people could only dream of: a full galley, multiple state rooms, a helicopter landing pad, and a garage that housed 2 smaller boats. The arrival of the 2 yachts caused an immediate sensation at Harbor Bay Marina. Boat owners, marina staff, and festival guests crowded the docks to get a better look at the impressive vessels. The yachts were larger and more luxurious than anything currently docked at the marina, and their simultaneous arrival created a buzz of excitement and curiosity. Marcus stood on the bridge of Dorothy's Legacy, wearing a crisp white captain's uniform and surveying the crowd that had gathered to watch his arrival. Next to him stood his wife Angela and daughter Zoe, both dressed elegantly for the day's festivities. Behind them, the yacht's crew moved with professional precision, securing the vessel to the dock and preparing for what would undoubtedly be a memorable day. As Marcus disembarked from his yacht, he was immediately surrounded by marina staff, boat owners, and festival organizers eager to meet the owner of such impressive vessels. But the moment that defined the day came when Officer David Patterson, who was working security for the festival, approached the dock. Patterson had clearly not recognized Marcus from a distance, but as he got closer, the recognition was unmistakable. The officer's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, embarrassment, and finally a grudging acknowledgement of the reality before him. "Dr. Thompson," Patterson said, his voice barely above a whisper. I had no idea you ... Marcus turned to face the officer, his expression calm, but his message clear. "Officer Patterson," he said loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear, "I believe you told me that my people don't own yachts. I thought you might be interested to know that I now own 4 yachts, 2 of which are currently docked at this marina. The other 2 are at marinas in San Diego and Santa Barbara." The crowd that had gathered fell silent, sensing the tension in the exchange. Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the dock. "You see, Officer Patterson, your assumptions about what black people can achieve, what we can afford, and where we belong are not just wrong, they're dangerous. When you and your colleagues approached me that night 3 months ago, you weren't just questioning my right to be at this marina. You were questioning my right to success, my right to wealth, and my right to enjoy the fruits of my labor in the same spaces as everyone else." Marina manager Robert Chun, who had been watching the exchange, stepped forward. "Dr. Thompson," he said, "on behalf of Harbor Bay Marina, I want to apologize again for what happened that night. Your presence here today and your continued membership at our marina is a privilege for our entire community." But Marcus wasn't finished. He had one more surprise planned. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a set of documents and handed them to Chun. "Mr. Chun," Marcus said, "I'm pleased to inform you that I've just purchased a 20% ownership stake in Harbor Bay Marina. As of this morning, I'm not just a slip holder here, I'm part owner of this facility." The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. Marcus had not only demonstrated his wealth, he had claimed ownership of the very space where he had been humiliated. The transformation that followed Marcus Thompson's dramatic statement at Harbor Bay Marina was both immediate and far-reaching. The image of the successful black surgeon standing between 2 multi-million-dollar yachts while addressing the officer who had racially profiled him became an instant symbol of black excellence and resistance. Video of the encounter, recorded by multiple festival attendees, went viral on social media within hours. The immediate impact at Harbor Bay Marina was profound. Marcus's partial ownership of the facility gave him a platform to implement changes that would ensure other people of color would never face the discrimination he had experienced. He worked with Chun to establish new policies requiring sensitivity, training for all marina staff and security personnel. They created a formal complaint process for reporting discrimination and established a scholarship program to support young people of color interested in maritime careers. But Marcus's influence extended far beyond a single marina. The story of his response to racial profiling resonated with successful Black Americans across the country who had faced similar assumptions and challenges. The hashtag yacht, while Black began trending on social media as other Black boat owners shared their own stories of discrimination and exclusion. Dr. Patricia Williams, the psychiatrist from Atlanta who had been denied yacht club membership, was inspired by Marcus's example to file a federal discrimination lawsuit against the club that had rejected her. The case, supported by the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, resulted in a $2.3 million settlement and forced the club to implement comprehensive diversity and inclusion policies. Robert Jackson, the tech entrepreneur from Seattle who had been arrested for stealing his own boat, used his experience and Marcus's model to establish the National Association of Black Marine Professionals. The organization now has over 1,500 members and hosts annual conferences that celebrate Black achievement in the maritime industry while addressing ongoing challenges with discrimination and exclusion. Marcus's story also caught the attention of major media outlets and academic researchers studying wealth inequality and discrimination. His experience became a case study in how successful people of color navigate racism in elite spaces, and his response became a model for turning individual incidents into broader social change. The legal ramifications were significant as well. Marcus's civil rights attorney, David Rodriguez, used the publicity generated by the case to launch a broader investigation into racial profiling practices by the Newport Beach Police Department. The investigation, supported by the Department of Justice, revealed patterns of discriminatory enforcement that led to comprehensive reforms in police training and accountability measures. Officer David Patterson, whose mocking laughter had sparked the entire incident, was eventually terminated from the police force after additional complaints of racial bias surfaced during the federal investigation. Officers Rodriguez and Collins received suspensions and mandatory retraining, but both remained on the force under close supervision. The personal impact on Marcus and his family was equally transformative. His daughter Zoe, who had witnessed her father's humiliation and subsequent triumph, was inspired to pursue a career in civil rights law. She now attends Harvard Law School and interns with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund during summers. Marcus himself became a sought-after speaker at conferences, universities, and corporate events, sharing his story and advocating for diversity and inclusion in traditionally white-dominated industries. He established the Thompson Foundation for Maritime Equity, which provides scholarships, mentorship, and business development support for people of color interested in boating, sailing, and marine industries. The foundation's flagship program, Sailing Against the Tide, has helped launch dozens of Black-owned marine businesses and has provided boating education to thousands of young people from underserved communities. The program's success has inspired similar initiatives in other cities, creating a national network of organizations working to diversify the maritime industry. Perhaps most importantly, Marcus's story became a powerful reminder that wealth and success don't insulate people of color from racism, but they can provide platforms for fighting back and creating change. His response to discrimination, turning humiliation into empowerment, prejudice into purpose, demonstrated that individual acts of resistance can spark broader movements for justice. Today, Harbor Bay Marina is one of the most diverse and inclusive marinas in California. The annual Summer Yacht Festival now includes a Diversity and Inclusion Award and the marina actively recruits boat owners and businesses from communities of color. Marcus's 2 yachts remain prominently docked at the marina, serving as daily reminders that excellence comes in all colors, and that assumptions about who belongs where can be not just wrong, but dangerously limiting. The story of Dr. Marcus Thompson reminds us that racism doesn't disappear when bank accounts grow larger or degrees accumulate on walls. In fact, success can sometimes make discrimination more painful because it forces us to confront the reality that no amount of achievement can fully shield us from the assumptions and prejudices that still permeate American society. When Officer Patterson laughed and said, "You people don't own yachts," he revealed something deeper than personal bias. He exposed a system of thinking that refuses to see Black Americans as fully entitled to the fruits of success. That laughter echoed centuries of exclusion, decades of being told that certain spaces, certain lifestyles, certain dreams were not for us. But Marcus's response teaches us something equally powerful, that we have choices in how we respond to discrimination. We can internalize the hatred and allow it to diminish us, or we can use it as fuel to prove that excellence cannot be contained by other people's limited imaginations. Marcus didn't just buy yachts to spite his detractors. He purchased a piece of the marina to ensure that future generations wouldn't face the same barriers he had encountered. He transformed a personal humiliation into a platform for broader change, turning his individual success into collective empowerment. The lesson isn't that we need to become millionaires to earn respect, or that wealth is the measure of our worth. The lesson is that when we achieve success despite the barriers placed in our path, we have an obligation to use that success to tear down those barriers for others. Today, when young Black children visit Harbor Bay Marina, they see yachts owned by people who look like them. They see possibilities that previous generations couldn't imagine. And they understand that their dreams are not limited by anyone else's assumptions about what their people can or cannot achieve. That, perhaps, is the greatest victory of all.